Okay, today guys, what I plan on showing you is how to raise and lower your clay to make sure that it's centered on the wheel. If you're watching this video by now, you've already gone through the do's and don'ts and how to prep everything to make sure that you're ready to work on the wheel. One of the key components to making anything cylindrical on top of a potter's wheel is making sure that the clay is centered, and this can be problematic for people because of time constraints and trying to rush through everything. So I want to give you guys a demonstration really how to make sure that your clay that you're working with is on top of the wheel. One thing that I want to start the video off with is the consistency of the clay. Before you even start, one of the things you guys will notice is we have a real big problem making sure that someone sprays down the clay from hour to hour. So you guys are kind of stuck with the clay that we have, and if it's too hard, you're going to have to rework and wedge the clay out so that it's a soft consistency when you're on the wheel. If it's been drying for a couple hours, it makes the whole wheel process incredibly difficult because the clay is too hard to either raise up or push down. Okay? Step one. After you've wedged out your clay and you've got it ready to go, pat down the bottom just so that you've got a flat edge. Make sure you've got a clean area of the wheel, and like I've said in previous videos, make sure that you use the circles that are on the metal as sort of a guide for what you're trying to hit bullseye wise and make sure and centering the clay. Nobody's going to do this perfect, but you want to try and aim for that center dot as much as possible, and then you can wiggle it back onto the middle. Now, as you start this process, one thing that's always good to have is all your materials ready and close by, so you don't have to constantly get up and down and refill everything. I've got my sponge, I've got my my wire tool, needle tool, and obviously a container full of water. What I'm going to do here is just start to spin the clay and let my hands dipped in water kind of smooth out the edges and any imperfections that might be there. A good thing to keep in mind anytime you're working on the clay is to make sure that you have your hands dipped in water and that you're not touching the clay as it's moving with dry hands. Obviously, if you're touching it with dry hands, there's a greater possibility of the clay sticking to your hands and then you're pulling up whatever it is you're working with. I've just spun the wheel around for a couple seconds and had water on top of my hands and smoothed out any imperfections or bumps that there might have been on top of the clay. Now, one thing that you're going to want to keep in mind when you're doing this is how your arms and hands are working. Too many times when people start to work on the wheel, they want to control the clay with their fingertips, and what that causes is an uneven amount of pressure when working with it. Instead of working with your fingertips, you want to work with your shoulders and your arms. And a good way to do this is either have them anchored down or have them, a center of gravity with your body over top by using your thigh, or you can rest them right on top of the drip guard here. Keep in mind though, if you're going to use the drip guard, you want to make sure that it's secure. I mentioned this in other videos, but sometimes when people rush, they don't make sure that this drip guard's secure. They put their arms on it or they bump it with their leg, and then all of a sudden stuff is just falling all over the place, and it takes them that much longer to start working, cleaning up to get back into working. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to spin the wheel and I'm going to use my hands to pull the clay up. To do that, I keep my arms sort of in a triangle or an A shape, and I just pull the clay up to make a cone. Now, it really doesn't matter how tall you get the cone, okay? The key that you're looking for here is to make sure that the bottom part of the clay that's spinning around is as close to being in the center as possible. Once you have a nice point on it, you can start pushing down. And I like to explain pushing down on the clay sort of the same way as if you were doing CPR on somebody. I'm right-handed, so I use the palm of my hand and I just center that over it, and as the wheel's turning around, apply a little bit of pressure. as the water and the moisture kind of gets sucked off of my hand, I can go ahead and put a little bit more on and continue to press down. The reason why lifting the clay up and pushing the clay down is so important to this process is it helps allow the clay that you've just put down on top of the wheel a chance to get centered onto the wheel and make sure that when you're working with whatever it is that you're trying to make, for example, we're going to be doing a plate, it helps to make sure that you're going to have a cylindrical object without any pieces of clay that might be hanging off and causing it to become uneven. Now, I'm going to take a picture of this to show you exactly what it looks like once you've done and got it all cylindrical. But a big thing to keep in mind is making sure that you're not oversaturating it to where you put too much water and you end up dripping all over the place. You know, I've got some water that's dripping, so I obviously didn't take enough time and care to make sure that I snapped the drip guard together. But also, you don't want to oversaturate because it could lead to the clay actually popping up off of the metal circle that's spinning around, and then you got to start all over again.